There were many chances for change to occur. The teacher could have shown mercy, compassion, and understanding. The children could have shown humility and self-control. The parents could have shown empathy, understanding, and been encouraging. Had any of these things occurred, as they should have, maybe the boy would have been encouraging to the girl and intervened when the other children were talking about and making fun of her. Human beings have a responsibility to take care of one another. A literary example of the consequences that may occur when people fail to take that responsibility is Frankenstein's monster in Mary Shelley's work, Frankenstein. There are many things that make us human. We as humans communicate in many different ways, through our actions, speech, gestures, literature, art, and music. We contemplate the future. We alter our environment and envy our neighbors. We are passionate, and we have a need to create. We reason and observe and show empathy and compassion, but most of all, we love. Shelley's text, Frankenstein, is doused with examples of humanity's failure to take its responsibility and the negative consequences of those actions. From the beginning, Shelley paints a picture of reject and disgust. The moment Victor finished the dream that filled him with madness and starvation, the beauty of it vanished, and breathless horror and disgust filled his heart. Here starts the destruction of a childlike creation similar to that of abortion, through rejection and neglect. In response to the rejection his father showed him, the monster filled with frustration and anger and had hatred towards him. He cried, "Unfeeling, heartless creator! You had endowed me with perceptions and passions, and cast me abroad as an object of scorn for all of mankind." Shelley not only portrayed the feeling of pain and rejection produced by the monster's creator, but she also showed the influence a stranger can have through his encounters. Upon entering the small village, the monster was treated with contempt and horror, as they grievously bruised him with stones by many other kinds of missile weapons. This unprovoked abusive experience caused him prudence when dealing with humans, because he could no longer trust them. Even after this, the monster began to love his family, who he saw had shown kindness to the needy. He who had helped them in so many ways and needed them so much surely deserved a shred of acceptance. So he endeavored to gain the trust and approval of a kindly blind father who did nothing when his own son beat him cruelly and unprovoked. When the monster's protectors had departed, it broke the only link that held him to the world. Innocence was lost as feelings of revenge and hatred filled his heart. As the monster lost connection and hope, he rebelled against his own passive ideals, starting the domino effect of sin and violence. Shelley seems to have a clear understanding of human nature and how a person who has nothing and nothing to believe in might respond to violence and anger towards his repeated kindnesses and good intention. Here's how she had the monster respond. "This was my reward for my benevolence. I had saved a human being from destruction, and my recompense is now that I writhe under miserable pain and wound with shattered flesh and bone. My feelings of kindness gave place to hellish rage and gnashing of teeth. Between this incident and the next, the monster was mellowed by nature and his feelings of hope restored. Although the monster did not ever intend to kill the small boy, the power that he felt in his hand after feeling powerless, unneeded, rejected, and angered for the entirety of his being caused him demonic joy as it occurred to him that he could create those feelings too. This is how he described it. I grasped his throat to silence him, and in a moment he lay dead at my feet. I gazed at my victim, and my heart swelled with exaltation. and hellish triumphs. Clapping my hands, I exclaimed, I too can create desolation. My enemy is not invulnerable. This death will carry despair to him, and 1,000 other miseries will torment and destroy him. Because of the failure of anyone to acknowledge their responsibility towards one another, and the monster's mental breakdown that resulted, not only did people miss out on a huge opportunity for him to be an asset to humanity, but the monster, the guilty, and the uninvolved were all hurt. The monster only asked one thing of his neglectful creator: to make a companion of similar makeup as him. Instead of recognizing that he should not do this, and coming up with an alternative plan, such as forgiving him for the death of his brother and welcoming him into his family as he ought, Victor promised what he asked, and when he was nearly finished, it occurred to him what he was doing. And in a fit of rage, he distorted and aborted his creation, and in front of his own progeny. The monster saw him destroy the creature on whose future existence he depended for happiness, and with a howl of devilish despair and revenge withdrew. After the monster had time to soak in that someone would at least appease his interest, he again became hopeful, but all of his feelings of hatred and sorrow and revenge were renewed when the promise of hope was ripped from him. Because of this last act on not only humanity's, but also his creator's part, the monster cracked beyond repair, with only the spirit of revenge to drive him. The monster's first intentional murder immediately followed the destruction of all that he had hoped for. So he made his cut deliberately deep. The monster murdered Clerval, Victor's one and only friend, and got Victor blamed for it, then to rub salt on a deep wound, just as Victor had done. He murdered Elizabeth on their wedding night. The monster found a demented satisfaction in the slow destruction of his progenitor that he later regretted. Because of the monster's repeated abuse, neglect, rejection, and loneliness, he became angered and did things that caused him remorse and self-hatred, causing him to believe that the world would be better without him. These feelings are evident when a portion of the monster's last words were, I shall die, and what I now feel be no longer felt. Soon these burning miseries will be extinct. The monster shows human typical characteristic responses in all forms of abuse, rejection, and neglect. For example, a person who experiences repeated rejection in our current economy may question their self-worth and develop depression. Verbal and physical abuse cause fear. A woman who is married and to an abusive husband avoids confrontation at all costs and becomes passive and compliant. Neglect causes loss of trust and rebellion. Babies who are neglected become emotionally shut down, building a protective wall. The monster could have been an asset to his community and the world had he been accepted. He showed positive attributes of humanity before all his dreams were crushed and was left alone to be beaten and scourged by all that crossed his path. The monster was not only kind and gentle, but also intelligent. He contemplated how best to be accepted and listened to through self-taught deductive reasoning and observations, paying close attention to details and probability. He was also able to communicate through both speech and written works. Shelley shows repeatedly that the monster is human and that he shows empathy when the cottagers were suffering, and because he felt that way, he chose to assist them in any way that he could. He had hope in humanity even after being beaten by an entire town and his most beloved Felix. When he was hurt and hurt others, he lost self-worth. He showed remorse, and he had longing to be accepted by humans as not only an asset, but also to be a person to be loved as he loved. The monster had the biggest asset that is part of human nature. He loved. If the monster was shown kindness by anyone, he would have been more likely to be able to cope with all the evil that he dealt with. Human beings not only have a responsibility, but also a need to take care of one another. If we fail, then not only are we hurting one another, but we are also hurting ourselves. When we do nothing, we are no better than those who abuse. For our inaction is just as damaging as the abuse itself, especially when the victim is one that is close to us. Frankenstein's monster was the victim of both abuse and inaction for the entirety of his life. Had one person taken responsibility and shown him love and compassion, as we as human beings ought in all situations, I believe the monster would not only not be a monster, but he would be good for this world. Frankenstein was obsessed with the inner workings of nature and life. Ironically, he was missing what was right in front of him. So he created a being that was more human than him, in the sense that he had a conscience. Victor Frankenstein was the real monster.